Hello and welcome to another live demonstration. So I'm always looking for things to bring you, to show you, to demonstrate techniques, products. So I know I've done this before, but if I remember it was a couple of years ago. And these were using Bombay inks. I think it was one of my first. So I thought I'll look at these again, reintroduce you to them and do another different demonstration. So the Bombay inks, these are very highly pigmented inks. So waterproof once dry, and actually very light, fast, archival, acid free. So they're actually a really nice medium for a lot of different techniques. So I'm going to do a picture of this. This is going to be a Scarlet Macaw. With these inks, I do find you do have to shake just to the pigment settles, so just to reactivate. And what I like is the dropper, because I can use that as part of the work as well, but I'll do that later. So I'm just going to put some colour down, and you need very little because they're very strongly pigmented. They're transparent colours apart from the black and the white. These are opaque, so great for covering, and we'll use those later. But the other colours are quite transparent, so you get a really strong colour, but you're able to layer and see the colours beneath. So I'm going to give an initial layer of the Indian ink, yellow. I didn't know if it was lemon, so, but this is yellow. So just put it on. I think I might have a slightly contaminated brush, but it doesn't matter. And you'll see I'm going to go over, because I often talk about using colours in the background as part and on the subject. It just brings it all together. So just quickly putting the yellow down and taking it through into the background. Just looking for any harsh lines. I'm not really thinking about fully where they're going. It is a wash, it's a first wash. Just adding a little bit more colour, because there are some areas that I do want to make sure do stay that little bit more yellow. So I'm just making sure it's a little stronger. Put it on, put it round. Go. I think that will be fine, that's enough. So while that's still wet, I'm going to put some red. Is this red I wanted or bright red? I think actually I want the bright red, which is a little bit more orange. But I'll use both, so just put some colour into my palette. And I'm going to put some of the dark red next to it, because I will use these in conjunction just to add different tones. Now, the reason I've chosen this subject is, firstly, I like drawing birds. I like the subject, but also there's lots of textures. You've got the texture of the feather, which you can make as soft or as detailed as you want. There's details in the foot, where they're much more detailed, lots of different textures there. So often think about, how can I create texture? And again, you'll see I'm just putting it on. I know where I want the red to stop, but I'm just again putting wash, and you can see in these areas how that yellow is glowing through. So just again putting red on. I do know I'm having to be a little bit more careful. I do know I can go back in with the white and the grey, but because I'm doing it very wet, very much like a watercolour wash, I want to retain some of the colour. Colour comes down here. This has dried a lot quicker than when I tried previously, before the colour actually moved a little bit. I was just seeing if I had a spray bottle, which I haven't, but I wanted it to run a little bit more into the wet background like it is here. It did it when I first did it, it did it previously into the background, but it's drying a little bit quicker than it does when I'm doing it in the studio. Okay, so that is my first, that's 2 layers, and now I'm just going to start, and you use a different red. This is, which one was this? This is red. The other one was called bright red, and you can see how I can just again pick up a little bit of tone. At this stage, I'm not overly thinking about detail. That will come. It's a later date. I'm just putting colour down, just looking at where I can put colour down and just drop it down. I'm not overly thinking about it. I'm just looking at where it would benefit from a little bit more detail. And then I'm going to go on to other areas because I need this to dry. So some areas I'm going to be a little bit more careful with, but other areas I'm just going to use the brush. The great thing about using a round brush like this is you can actually create feather shapes and textures really easily. Okay, so again, not very complicated, just put colour down. Right, dropped my tissue. The reason I need this is just to clean my brush and make sure it's not contaminated, because I have noticed, because they're highly pigmented, their colours, if you've got any colour left on your brush, it does change the colour of the other colour that you're using. So just making sure I'm keeping a clean brush. So this is a blue, and I found this was very strong, so I want a very light wash, being a little bit more careful to put the colour down. Again, I'm just going to not be overly worried about where the feathers are completely, but I do know there are some green and yellow up here, and as I've got the yellow down, I don't want to completely have that disappear. A little bit stronger.
Anita?
Yes.
Should we do some hellos?
Hellos, yes.
Hellos. We'll say hello to Azure Muse.
Azure.
Who is watching in Florida, 6 a.m, very chilly. And they say, "You're such a good teacher, and I've got to tell you thank you when I can."
When you say chilly, do you mean like we've got in the minus and the 0 figures, the frost and the snow, or do you mean it's about 10 degrees?
Probably cold for Florida.
Because I know my friends who live in Miami, they have their coats on and their Ugg boots when it gets to 10 degrees. We're a little bit used to the cold in the UK. But hello.
Kevin's watching in Ohio, where it's 6 a.m. as well, and they've got a light dusting of snow.
Yeah, they know what cold is, yes. We don't often get snow in Newark. It kind of brushes over us, so we get a bit excited if we see it. But what time did you say?
6 a.m. again.
6. That's okay. Yeah. That's a fairly reasonable.
Amanda's watching in the Isle of Wight, and it's the same time as it is.
Is it? Yeah, I visited the Isle of Wight last year. It was lovely. So hello to everybody, and thank you for watching. So again, I'm just putting colour down. I'm not overly thinking it. I'm going to mix some of the red with some of the blue, and I'm going to put a little bit of dark under here. It just starts to, this is all, again, base layers. What I'm doing is just putting down some shadow and some areas that I know want to be a little lighter. I'm still not thinking about detail yet. What I don't want to do is just really rush ahead and completely rush with this. I want to think about it a little bit more. So just put in shadow. So under here, it comes round. Because it's still wet, it's still got that lovely movement, that's soft. You get a much softer edge, which is quite nice. And as I move up, where it's a little bit drier, it's a little bit harder. So it's quite nice to have those different textures. And like I said, the brush is a perfect tool for creating feathers. So I just can drop it on.
Apparently it's 45 degrees in Florida, which is about 8 in
That is quite chilly.
Yeah.
It is quite chilly, actually.
Oh, and Selma says hello.
Hello, Selma. Right, a little bit more colour. And that looks a bit too dabby. So what I'm going to do is just, that looks very dabby. So what I'm going to do is change how I hold my brush. Just creates different textures. And this is what I was talking to someone about the other day. Just holding your brush in a different way. Get a round brush like this is your biggest friend. You will use it for so much, and it will create a lot of texture as well. So, like I say, this is quite transparent. I'm just using the same colour just to add a little bit more. What I'm doing is making sure I'm following and looking at the shape that the feathers make, because this will again bring it out and create that shape. Still very loose, very rough. And again, keeping some of that lovely colour I put down in the first place. I don't want to lose that. Much stronger detail. This is where I'm going to use the brush, because you've got that lovely edge and it creates fabulous feather shapes. Just load up strong colour. You can see how you can just, again, look at the way I've changed the way I hold my brush. And I know a lot of people do actually struggle with this. They hold it one way. So you learn the medium you're using, but also you learn the tools you're using. Learn how you can change what you're doing by just holding them in a different way. So just maybe putting a little bit more detail on now. Just bringing out some colour.
Oh, Anita.
Yes.
Michelle wants to know what size is your round brush?
My round brush. Now this is called an all-rounder. It's the SAA silver brush. It's a size 10. Now I know I probably could have done it in a much bigger brush. A lot of people get very scared of big brushes. And I think this one is actually, it's quite nice and big. And you'll see I use it pretty much all the time, even for the detail. So you can get nice detail as well as those lovely shapes. And again, it's just the way you start to hold. So this is a size 10. I may use a smaller brush later, but at the moment it's given me everything I need. Okay, so I've done that. I'm just going to, and you can see how I'm starting to layer, and it's quite subtle. Again, I'm not overworked and worried about detail. I'm getting the colour down and allowing the work to find itself. So I'm just going to, this is that same blue, but a bit darker strength. And I think because you've got feathers, you've got much fluffier feathers up here. You've got some feathers that are coming out of the foot here, but you've got these lovely wing feathers here. And this is where I do want to concentrate on keeping those a little bit sharper. So again, in with the darker blue, just making sure it is also touching, and I've not got areas that just kind of don't feel like they belong. I'm not going to completely work on this area. I'm just going to bring out and indicate that some of the feathers are much smoother, much longer, much flatter. Okay. But you will see actually that dries quite much lighter than you've put it on. Just sharpen him, which I found a surprise because it was great strong colour. It's probably the paper I'm working on because I'm using a watercolour paper. It's probably absorbing. But in the end, it will dry quite bright. And also, if you use it very neat, I know I've used a lot with water, it has a kind of a shimmer, it dries a little bit shimmery. Waterproof once dry, which is great. And I'm going to break all the rules. I'm going to use black. Now, I have no problem using a ready-made black. I think it has its benefits. I could make a black with the reds and the yellows and the blues, mixing those together, but I have one with my set and I'm going to use it. One thing you can do with black is you can change black. You can make it much more blue black, much more red black, by just adding colours to it. But what you've got is that lovely, strong, dark colour to start with. And it's strong, and I did say it was more opaque, so I'm just making sure that I've got a lot less colour. So now I'm just going to work on the beak. So what I'm going to do is put all the layers down, and then we'll take a break because I can dry it. Then I can start to work on the details. So in the beak, it's got that lovely smooth finish. So that's what I want to show by giving you some very structured indication. So just think about it. This is very rough, soft, much smoother. And it all makes a difference on how you just show that there is a difference there. So I might have some much harsher, much sharper, a lot less soft. Brush isn't wet enough to push that up. So making sure it's touching. Dab it out because it's not quite there. So I'll need to let that dry and I can work on that. I'm just going to use that black again to work on the feet, just to put colour there. And with the feet I do notice there are some areas which I need to keep light. Now it doesn't really matter if I lose those because I can use the white to bring them back, and I will do, to be honest. Just thinking the shadows. There's not a huge amount of shadow on the original image without looking for it. So I'm using a little bit of interpretation because there will be shadow where things cross over others. I'm going to go in neatly and pick up the claws because I want to show you how fine you can pick up. Plus what I'm also doing is I'm trying to remember where, yes, I've got the image in front of me, yes, I've drawn it out, but sometimes I do get a little lost at what I'm looking at. So if I put in the key features, it just helps me to remember which foot is which and where it goes. So now I've got some dark on here. I'm just going to pick out the dark areas because then again I'm just picking up the key features. I'm just thinking this has got to be really dark because this is where the tongue, which is this bit here, touches the beak. So this is very dark under here. Like I say, I know it's waterproof once dry, so I can go over, but I know it's not going to move. So all I'm just doing is just filling up as I go along. I know it is very much like colouring in as such. If you've got a good image down, you're then putting colour on, and you can put colour on however you want. You can be as loose or as tight as you want. Now the eye I need to do, this is where, for one of the very few reasons, I'm going to go to a much smaller brush. I tried it with the bigger brush, but I just lost the eye shape, and I think the eye is so important. I do need to think about that a little bit more. Not sure I like the... That's it. Now it's got an eye, it works for me. So I think that is a good time for a short break. Gives me a chance to look at it, to dry it, and then I can start to work on the detail and start to make it come forward. So areas like the foot and the face, you know, give them a little bit more dominance. But I need to stop. I need to have a break. I need to look and then think about what I'm going to do next. So join us in a minute and we'll continue with this demonstration.
Let us bring out the artist in you. If you'd like to learn how to paint or improve your painting, the SAA is here to inform, encourage, and inspire you every step of the way. When you become an SAA member, you get so many benefits, including the free bi-monthly newsletter Paint, packed with inspiring step-by-step projects, fascinating articles, and detailed information to get your creative juices flowing. Discounts on over 13,000 art products featured on the SAA website and in the Home Shop catalogue, with free order line and free delivery in the UK mainland. A devoted SAA team on hand to answer your questions and give you the confidence and motivation you need to start painting and develop at a pace that suits you. Plus, a free welcome pack filled with gifts and practical help to get you started, as well as the opportunity to make friends with like-minded people.
Best thing to be a member is the inspiration from the magazines, to be able to purchase things at a very reasonable price.
Yeah, you get the reduction on all the materials, the advice you get.
I can shop from home.
It's a community.
It seemed like a very friendly sort of organisation.
If somebody's thinking of joining, don't spend too long thinking. Just join. They'll love it.
And we're back.
Hello and welcome back. So in that short time, I've managed to dry this off and actually look at the original, see where I want to go. And I'm going to try and structurally move forward. It probably won't happen because I will tend to jump around. But I will try because I think I want to start to bring up some details in some areas and not in others. Because I used the black, I'm just making sure I've really cleaned my brush. And I'm going to go back in with the red. And actually, good shake, because I need strong pigment. I'm going to use the actual dropper that you get with the bottle, because I do like to use this. I think it gives you such great shapes and textures. Not using it all over because some areas are much softer, but look at those lovely textures you can get by just dropping in straight from the bottle. So it's adding areas that I might want to just give it a little bit more texture to. Okay, I think that's enough. Oh, I needed some colour, I forgot that. So put some colour on my palette. Now I'm going to start to, what I do notice is it dries very quickly on the palette. It's waterproof once dry, so it's not able to be reworked like a watercolour. So again, I kind of forget that a little bit. Used to working with watercolour, so used to just going back in and reworking the colour on the palette. But this is waterproof once dry, so once it's dry, I can't do that. So I do need to sometimes think about that. So I want a darker red, but not losing some of that lovely orange. Okay, take some colour off.
Mind your head.
Sorry, can't reach it, Gary.
Need a bigger step.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, they've made this bench really high, so I have to stand on a step just to reach it. But
We haven't made it. We've made it a normal height.
yeah, thank you. So I like to work a lot of time standing up, even when I have the opportunity to sit down, because I find if I sit down, I get very overconsumed with detail. It must be that kind of very relaxed way that you get if you're sitting down. This is most of the time when I'll overwork. Well, I like to stand. Firstly, you've got a lot more movement. Might be a bit too dark, but we'll see. A lot more movement and able to move your arm, which will give you much more texture and able to use your brush in different ways. So I will do a lot of my work standing up. I can't, plus, in the lighting, I can't always see. I can't actually see the colours I'm putting on all the time. So a lot of it is a surprise when I finish. You probably see it much better than I do because the light is very bright in here. So definitely, see, I might have gone a little bit OTT over there, but not overly concerned. I can come back to it.
That looks all right to me.
Okay, thank you, Gary. I can't see, I really do struggle sometimes actually seeing the colours. So tonal values are actually quite difficult. But let's work my way down here. Let's start to bring out and add a little bit more detail. Just changing, just dabbing into the red a little bit more. And I tend to do it as I go along. I just can see where maybe I need a lot more dark and light. That definitely needs a lot more dark, but I might let it dry and then finish it at the end. So by giving it a dark, so I'm using the blue and the red just to make a nice, it's not black, it's a kind of a purple, which is a great shadow colour. And then just, like I say, a lot of the work is done with the brush. The brush does the fabulous shapes. So a little bit darker. Try not to lose some of the colour I've got by making it too dark. Stand back. I might go in with the blue now. So into the blue. Just another layer. I'm just now started to think about the shape of the feather and what details I can put in just to make it look like it's a feather. Again, I'm going to be very careful not to overwork it, but it's got that lovely feathers. Though they're smooth, they still have a slight jag to their edge, so I can bring that in. Just gives it a little bit more texture. So you'll find that probably this area is going to be much more worked on, because I think it's needs it. I think it just shows how the feathers sit. Okay, come under here, get it to touch and be part of the red areas. I'm not always thinking about the exact colours or even the exact way the feathers are. What I'm doing is I'm using the original as a guide and then just often work how I just feel it needs to work. So I'm just going to make a green. I need stronger yellow just because I can see more green in the wing, and I think that will be nice to bring out. So like colours, you can mix, add the green. I might bring it down a little bit more. I might put some in here. It just draws it together a little bit. Well, I was looking at interesting facts about macaws, and there are some interesting facts, but there wasn't an overwhelming amount that I could remember. So I know they're a very popular bird, and they've actually got, compared to their body length, they've actually got the longest tail compared to other parrots. So their tail feathers are a really dominant part of this bird. That's too orange. Just want to bring that yellow, make it a little stronger. It's a bit wishy-washy. But like I say, it's transparent, so it was just still going to show the colours underneath. Okay. Right. So I'm working on this area, so I'm going to now put a little bit more work into it. So I'm using the black and the blue, just toning down, just so I can, I'm going into a smaller brush. This is when I do change brushes, is when I want to work on an area with a little bit more detail. As much as I can get most shapes I want from the big brush, it's much quicker, much easier. I don't want it too blue, dark, but I wasn't getting enough darkness, so I've added the blue and the black just to give me a little bit more strength. It just wasn't happening.
One of my school friends, he had a macaw when he was growing up, and his parents have still got it.
Wow.
It's about 35 years old.
Yeah, I know they are long-lived,
Yeah.
and a lot of people have them as pets because they're quite bright animals. But the tail was the only thing I could remember about. Do they talk or
They can mimic.
mimic?
There's one at Woodside Wildlife Park that says hello when you come in and says his name and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Let me. I know what I can do to finish this off. I think I might be fluffing and I might be overthinking, so I'm going to just move on. That's bugging me. So here I've done too dark, and let's see what I can do by just adding some of this red. It's a little better. Don't know how it's going to dry, but I'm a little happier now. It was much too dark. So this is straight from the bottle.
Well, Michelle would like to know what your smaller brush is, what size it is.
Smaller brush is a worker, a size 6. So I don't often go much smaller than that because I think you can get everything you need from it. But there are some instances where if you start to struggle, just go to a small brush. What I do recommend is you don't start with a small brush straight away, because I think you then overcompensate with detail, and I don't think it needs it straight away. Right, I'm going to now start to work on this feature because I can always come back to this. So I did read that the face is white skin, and what it does have is white feathers coming out of it. So it's got all the primary colours. This is, again, why it's a lovely subject to paint, because it's got all your red, yellow, blues. It's got so many different textures, with the face and the skin having, isn't smooth and soft, it has feathers coming out of it. The eye, I think they're either a green or yellow, very pale. Just looking at the shape, so it kind of comes around here, like that. So I could also see some little red feathers coming out, so I'll add some. And this is where the detail makes a difference. I'm not going to over detail it, but I think definitely where you can bring out a little bit more detail on features. So the face, like I say, is a soft, fleshy, and it comes down into, right. So this is the tongue. So he's obviously licking his foot. So again, the other reason I chose this subject was because it's not just sitting there looking at me, it's actually a little bit more animated. And it just gives me a lot more to work, and this is where you can really go to town on your textures and movement and splash it on. Okay. So if this, I just want to really distinguish and show that there is a difference. Right, back into here. Right, foot. So the foot is quite, I'm just going to give it a little bit more texture and shadow. And then I was do all the little dots or the scales or whatever they're called on the foot. I was struggling to get those on. I was trying to find a way. I was doing each one with a brush. You can do it, but I get a little bit bored with it, I think. So, you know, that's one way if you've really got the patience, which I actually haven't, is one way. But I was rummaging through my art box just to see what I could do. And I found a natural sponge, and this gives those perfect little pattern on the foot. What I'm going to have to do, sorry Gary, oops, sorry, is it's still a bit wet here, so I'm just going to have to dry it. Sorry, I just needed to dry it because it was contaminating my brush, and all I was doing was moving it around. It's just the foot. And you can see where I put that black on, it's faded back again. This is where I said I was actually quite surprised about how much it did fade back. So into putting on the pattern and the detail. I do find you do have to keep topping up your colours because they're not reworkable. But that has lots of benefits when you're painting, because you can just work in. So I'm dabbing it on.
Can't quite see that, Anita.
Sorry, just dabbing on. This is a natural sponge, and I've looked around it and chosen the area which I think will work best. might be too harsh, so just dab off. There you go. Let's give me some texture. So how much easier is that than me doing every single little. It doesn't mean I will stop. What it means is I can use that now and gives me a lot less work to do. So let's look at the detail on the foot. Just dib dab. The brush is a bit wet because I want to use the opaqueness, and now I can use that patterning, very tip of my brush, to just show the detail, but I don't need to do every single little shape. All I'm doing now is just picking up the fine details, just now starting to finish, starting to think about what really do I want to see and what can I leave. So these little patterns, I can just do little areas which suggest the texture. This is why I've changed the smaller brush. It just gives that a little bit more. And I tend to work quite sketchily, moved around as if I was using a pencil, because it just gives you that little bit of control. Just seeing if I can see and understand. Some of this is understanding the foot. Is it really, does it look like this? What bit does this relate to? And this does help you when you're painting and putting your tones in, because you've understand that this foot is behind the bill, so it needs to show that it's behind. I think that's worked quite well.
Alma says she loves this painting. Thanks, Anita.
No problem.
And
Thank you.
Amanda says next time you're in the Isle of Wight, you have to go and visit and see her rats.
Oh, rats. I do like rats. I was watching something about them the other day. There's very little I don't like except for the crabs on the beach. I don't like them, but I don't mind any animal. And actually, because we're coming into the year of the dog, I will be doing lots of dog paintings to celebrate. So I know I've been fiddling and I'd love to go in more, but I just want to start to finish. So using the white, the opaque white, just to give a little bit of highlight. And I don't know if you can see that, but by just doing that, I think it suddenly makes it zing. Using the small brush, being quite fine. And I'm just not bringing everything, just picking up areas that I feel need to capture a little bit of detail. There's a little bit of white. Again, just using. What I also noticed is, this is just natural to me, how I hold my brush. I use my hand as a support. Now, if you can't do that, for this kind of fine line, you can use your other hand or use a mole stick or a stick or something. But that little bit of support really helps, especially with detail, those fine detail lines. So I don't have to lean on my work. Now, I know a lot of people do struggle with that. I think I just tend to do it quite naturally. But there's plenty of ways that you can use it yourself. Right. Again, just use the brush. Yes, you can't see the white on the original image, but I think it just needs something to help show direction of either the feathers. And I think that worked quite nicely, maybe even could do with another bit. As much as this white is opaque, and it is covering, I think you can sometimes get better results with a gel pen. But for this, I think it is working quite well. Again, I probably can't see it as well as you can. So I'm not highlighting or going around the feathers with black, it's the white I'm using. And this is still a bit contaminated, still red, it's still a bit wet, but again, I can use that. See, there's areas over here that need a bit of work, just to show, give you a bit of... I like this bit. This is the bit that I find suddenly it all just comes together. After all the struggle and the thought and the trying to work out what you're trying to do through the rest of it, this bit is my relaxing bit. So I'm going to, oops, a bit too much, just dot a little bit of white onto, and the claws are really long, but that must be for picking out fruits and things like that, or seeds. Just want to show that they have a sheen to them. Go back in with the white, just to add a little bit more texture, which might be a bit flat. But this brush will, like I say, I don't often change my brushes that often because I don't need to. I find I can get most of what I need with just either 2 or 3 brushes. A flat would probably be this will be my staple brush. That and a flat, because you've got so many textures you can make from it. Right, I'm probably nearly there. I will just keep fiddling. I'll keep adding bits and pieces here. So, I'm going to stop. Like I say, I will probably look at it when I come back and go, oh, I could just do that bit. But the Bombay inks, they're light fast, acid-free, archival. They're a lovely, very fluid, but highly pigmented, waterproof once dry. So you've got lots of things you're able to layer without disturbing the layers underneath. So they're a lot of fun. And like I say, one thing I do like, I like to use the dropper as part of a drawing tool. I think it just gives some lovely marks. So I hope you enjoyed that, and join us later in the week for a live workshop with Matthew Palmer.